Hey there, everybody, it's Russ. We flew all the way from Spain back to Portland to check out the Maid Show. And in this video, we're going to share with you guys the hottest bikes we've seen at the show. All right, we're here with Tyler from Bitchin' Bikes. This has to be one of the most talked about bikes at the show. Tell me about this bike.
Yeah, this is something we're pretty excited about. It's an idea that my friend and engineer Nick came up with recently. This is a Geoshift bike.
So what's changing? It's this angle there.
Yeah, so the seat tube itself is mounted on a pivot near the bottom bracket, and it is actuated by a hydraulic actuator mounted in the top tube, which is a modified dropper post.
Okay.
It's shortened up. Nick also he designed all new internals with dual chamber, a new head that uses suspension bushings, and he added an IFP so that when you actuate the dropper, it retracts instead of extends.
Okay.
So it works in the direction that we need to for this.
How many degrees can the seat tube angle be adjusted by?
This is a very raw prototype, so that can vary, but 10 degrees is what's moving right now.
Yeah.
So it's set up at 73 at the moment, and we'll move up to 83.
When would you want to move the seat tube angle this way or that way?
So what we've found in mountain biking is our modern mountain bikes are like winch and descend style of mountain bikes have really steep seat tube angles because they work well for climbing steep terrain.
Right.
And if you live in the Pacific Northwest where you're only ever climbing and descending, it's amazing. It's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
If you live at a lot of the other places in the country where you have either more rolling terrain or where we're in the foothills. So I've got to pedal a little bit to get into the foothills and then have a lot of pedally terrain within our steep stuff. So we kind of get everything.
Right.
Riding a 78 seat tube angle bike on the flat ground for 20 minutes on the way to the trails, it sucks.
Right.
It's not very efficient. And that's why gravel bikes are still in that 73, 74 seat tube angle range.
Right.
So your way to the trails or on the pedally, rolly stuff,
Yeah.
you're going to have it in that 73 range. As soon as the train starts to come up, well, seat tube angle is going to come up to match it.
Okay.
We like this one a lot. This is a Paul component dropper trigger. We're in Chico, California with Paul components. We love them. They're awesome. We made a double stack version of it. So the bottom lever is your standard for the dropper post.
Right.
The upper one actuates the Geoshift.
Okay.
And kind of how we have it set up is you have easy access to the dropper posts as per usual.
Right.
And then you can kind of use your thumb to grab both of them at the same time as you're going to extend the seat post and put it forward as you go into a climb.
Right.
You can also hit both of them and drop them both down at the same time.
All right, we're here with Colin, and you're actually in university. Tell me about the program.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a part of the Cal Poly Bike Builders Club. So we're a university-based club that helps students design, fabricate, and build bikes. So we're sort of involved from anywhere from the ideation and design process through the fabrication and the finishing process of bicycle frames.
There looks like there is a ton of stuff going on with this bike. Can you just walk us through it?
Yeah, totally. So this was a really fun opportunity for me, kind of like an engineering exercise, just to combine a lot of different elements I've seen in other bikes or wished other bikes had, and just see what it looks like as like one cohesive package. So starting from the front end, the bike uses a center steering hub that's cable actuated. So there's actually a steering axis that's inside the hub itself on a main kingpin axle. And I have two brake cables on either side that run to a pulley here where the steer tube is. And then, one of the big benefits that this layout enables is a really low cargo floor in the front while maintaining a very short wheelbase. So it's about 1,300 millimeters in wheelbase, and I have an 18-inch front wheel. And the upper cargo load deck is pretty much slammed on top of the front tire. And then there's also a lower cargo deck, so you can run like a small bento box or something down there.
Right.
Then one of the other things I was pretty excited about is there's an integrated lighting system. So on the front and rear of the bikes, there's LED lights, and I can control all of that from a push button right here. And everything's controlled by a PCB and battery that's hidden in the down tube there.
Okay.
And then the whole thing is also uses an Alphine internally geared hub with a Gates drive. And one of the design elements I wanted to do there was maintain like a very long straight line running from the front to the rear.
Yeah.
And that also allows me to do drop chainstays. And it was almost just like circumstantial that doing the drop chainstays also allowed me to run the belt without a frame split.
Oh, wow.
So this is the second iteration of a center steer hub. So
Okay.
I originally did the first design for a university class, but I designed the first hub in that course, and then building on some of the things I learned from that first hub, a lot of the drawbacks that I had with it, I used that to inform the design of this iteration. Like one of the big challenges I had with the first hub, for example, was torsion from braking. What would happen is I had a really big rotor, 203 millimeters in the front, and when you grab a fistful of brakes, the axial or the torsion caused by the braking pretty much just twist the axle in the dropouts. So I made a lot of changes on this one to just make it a much more rigid member of the frame.
I'm from River Falls, Wisconsin, just outside of the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul. This is the rando. So this is inspired by the Japanese Odyssey, which is a ride that goes from south to north, the full length of Japan through rural forest roads. So I wanted to build an endurance touring road bike that was fully mechanical, so mechanical brakes, mechanical shifting, but fully aero and fully modern road bike, but for that ride.
Really interesting design things here. What's up with the split top tube?
Split top tube kind of goes along with design language in a lot of my bikes. It also is an interesting way to attach bags because you can fit the bolts through the bolt-on bags directly through. And it gives a stiffness and a really thin silhouette from the side view of the bike. Yeah, so really thin stays. There's an extra support in the stays for the rear rack. So it's a little bit more robust for the rear rack while keeping the stays really light. Using the Grotech Equal brakes, some of my favorite mechanical brakes, and still having it be fully internal housing. So easy to put a bag up front without any kind of cable interference. Using pretty much a full Ingrid drivetrain, a steel fork with Columbus Max blades. For the tires, so really nice snappy chain stays, really short. So
How short is it?
these are 410.
Oh,
yeah,
tucked.
yeah, pretty tucked, very tucked, especially with the cutouts. So yeah.
I couldn't help but notice your shifter.
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it? Nice and shiny. Yeah, no, I love these shifters. I've used them on several gravel builds, both for my customers and for myself. And it's for using modern drivetrains and still having the ability to friction shift is really nice. Have that full capability of a wide range cassette, but having that shifter has been really, really fun.
Tell me about the paint or the coating. It's really eye-catching.
Yeah, so this is a Cerakote finish. So Rare Earth we have all of our own finishing in-house. So we do powder coating and Cerakoting. And so this is, that's just actually the first bike that we've Cerakoted. Along with the Cerakoting, there's all this copper leaf logos and detail and the chainstays inside of the fork blades.
So we're here with Corey from Thompson Custom Bicycles. Tell me about this beautiful bike here.
This bike is for a local customer. Owned a lot of race bikes in his past and wanted something a little more civilized for his impending retirement, I think, where he could maybe ride at night, maybe do a little camping, maybe not get all splattered if the weather got bad. I said, well, that sounds like a Ren the Nurn bike. So that's what we built for him. Some fun little details on it that he asked about, so we incorporated. We did the bilaminated head tube, which I do occasionally. He has a classic Eisentraut that he really loves, so he wanted the Eisentraut seat stay attachment. I went and did that. It's got an integrated light system, the automatic connection for the Schmidt hub. All the wires are inside, the light switch is on the top of the stem, and yet it's pretty modern. It's got a 12-speed GRX group with disc brakes, the new chain rings from White Industries. So thank you to them for setting us up with those. He's also a longtime IDL saddle rider, so we got a brand new production IDL saddle for him.
Is this one low trail or mid trail, or how do you want it?
I would say lowish.
Let's see, is this an inch threadless?
1-inch threadless headset, yes. This one's from Mike. It's a needle bearing. I think it makes sense for most steel bikes still, unless it's a real big person or a mountain bike or something like that. Saves a lot of weight over 1.1 inches. So friends can follow you and not get a face full of dirt.
So we're here with Josh from Francis Bikes. What is this amazing pink contraption here?
This model is called the Mixy Hall.
Okay.
So you can see it's a Mixty. It's a cargo bike. This is set up. It's got kid seat and a footrest and bars for a young kid. And, all this pulls off and you've got classic low gravity cargo bike.
What's going on with the steer here? It looks like it's a cable linkage.
Yeah, cable linkage.
Wow. So who does the steering, the child or the person behind?
When my kid was littler and we traveled to school, I would let her steer for blocks.
Okay.
Because she loved it. and I would just take my hands off the bars.
What kind of stuff would you usually carry down here?
I mean, anything. You know, what have you got? Like,
I think it'd be perfect for a small dog.
oh, sure, yeah. We put a dog in it. I've put tools, anything. I mean, yeah. This isn't my personal bike, but I load mine up all the time.
Okay. What's the function of having the dual top tube?
I mean, it's a Mixy design.
Okay.
This top tube just enables me to keep the lower chassis light. It's just another way of doing the Long John style bike. My take on bikes in general, whether I'm building a cargo bike, like if I'm building an all-around bike that's not just like somebody's lightweight fixed gear,
Yeah.
I'm designing for full fenders. The fenders are all getting attached at multiple places. There's a dyno hub, front and rear lights.
Yeah.
All just like good integration is kind of like what I'm going for.
So we're here with fellow bike YouTuber Ron. You've joined the club.
I've joined the club, but you know, I got a long ways to go, Russ. I know.
Well, tell me about this beautiful red bike here.
This is inspired by the 1992 S-Works M2 frame that Ned Overend rode to victory in the Durango first mountain bike world championships. And he won 92 livery. But I wanted to emulate modern geometry. I took a Specialized Epic hardtail and just adjusted for sag since I'm not using suspension.
Yeah.
And wanted to try out some new things and kind of have a steeper seat tube angle, slacker head tube angle, shorter chainstay, longer top tube, and so kind of make it modern. Yeah, modern under the hood. You know, that's my thing. So.
Yeah. What is the head tube angle? It looks kind of slack.
It is 68.
Okay.
Yeah, so not crazy, but I mean, adjusted for sag, like something like this would have like a 67, but once you lean into it, it becomes a 68, you know?
Beautiful full coverage Hondo fenders with my custom flaps front and rear. The front one will keep your toes dry, and it's made out of a flexible rubber material, so if you snag it on a speed bump or a curb or something, it's not going to make a horrible noise or break or anything.
Right.
And the rear one hangs down a little further, so it seems to be a stiffer material, and it's got high-grade reflective on the back.
Well, let's talk about the bike nerdy bits on here. What's a handlebar?
The handlebar is a Control Tech Tie Mania.
Okay.
I usually do like a 25.4, 26.0, of course, and I 31.8 is kind of me settling, but I wanted titanium and Control Tech, even though this isn't the first iteration of Control Tech. Control Tech to me was like one of my first lusty component brands back when I was getting into bikes in the early 90s. So I want a little ode to that, and the stuff is super light, and I could still take off the grips because I love a nice moto throttle. You know, we're drilled out under there. You know?
Let's talk about the chain rings, the multiple chain rings.
Multiple chain rings.
When I first saw it, I thought it was a half-step granny, but apparently it's not.
Yes, it's it's we say it's an 8th step. But yeah, I've got a 20. It's a 94 BCD. I do most of my builds with that, and the little ring is a 22, and then the next ring is a 35, and the next ring is a 36. But the outer ring is just a dummy ring.
Okay. So do you think two by is the next one by?
Oh yeah, I mean it's been the next one by for years. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know what people are doing with these derailleurs that are 4 times the size of a normal rear derailleur. I mean, literally, it's like, I don't know what's going on right now, but people are making components for e-bikes only,
right.
You know, so
Yeah.
it's, the lowly, like, attractive derailleur is a thing of the past, and sadly enough. So, you know, you just need a real good chainstay protector because you're not going to get any tension from these old derailleurs.
Right.
Enough to do it, but,
Nice.
you know, you just got to do a little bit extra. And the front derailleur, you know, it's far from over.
Yeah.
It's far from over.
Save the front derailleur.
Say it, please.
So we're here with Chris from Good Grief. Where are you from? And let's talk about this bike.
We're from Colorado Springs, Colorado. We just struck out on our own this January, so a relatively new company.
Yeah.
This bike in particular was built for my wife, Lauren, over there. She has some particular needs when it comes to frames that she's never been able to find in a non-custom frame. So she has extremely long legs with a saddle height of 805, as you can tell,
smokes.
but extremely short arms, so we call her the T-Rex. This bike is built for T-Rexes. Super deep custom on the rack, obviously. We do a lot of really slow bike packing. We're very much into party pace, as you would say. Yes. We're very much into slow bike camping, all that kind of stuff, just kind of taking our time. So it makes for a super stable front end if you're descending anything. We ride pretty loaded usually when we go out, so we just wanted to make sure that she had a stable enough thing to, tackle gravel roads, fire roads in Colorado to, single track, anything like that.
What's the trail? Is it low trail, high trail, mid trail?
Mid trail, actually. Yeah, so it definitely feels better with the front load on it. The rake on it's about 60 millimeters. And then with the long chain stays, we did 510 on the chain stays just for land cruiser, really. So, yeah.
I noticed that it's got really short or almost like a zero offset stem. Did you compensate for that by having a longer top tube or?
Actually, shorter top tube.
Oh, shorter top tube.
So, yeah, she's always ridden extra larges, obviously, because of the leg length, but everything is too far of a reach for her. So, on her production bikes, I was building her zero offset stems, and I really wanted a little bit of style with this one. So yeah, ended up shortening the top tube to bring the projection forward, and that also really helps when you're descending to have your weight a little bit more forward in the bike for that better handling. Yeah.
So we're here with the Lost Workshop, and you flew a ways to get here. Where are you from?
From Melbourne, Australia.
How long have you been making frames?
About 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Just been doing road, gravel, mountain, track.
Yeah.
Whatever my customers want and whatever I feel like making. This is a special build for a customer back home. He just retired, so it's his forever bike, I guess. All day gravel riding rig with a few extra touches for some overnighters. Got the triple mounts on the fork. Another bottle cage down there if needed. He just rides gravel and is keen to do a couple of overnighters. Wanted external cable routing to keep it simple.
Yeah.
And painted up to look like the homes in Santorini in Greece. It's always been a favourite place of his. And the special little touch, engaged Jen Green to do the head badge with a nice little painted kookaburra on it. This is our first one where we've integrated more 3D printing into it. So I've done printed binders and other smaller parts before, but this one includes a printed yoke and dropouts as well for the flat mount and for the transmission UDH integration.
What's the bottom bracket? Is that a T47? Or?
Yeah, T47, 86.5, so internal cup. It gives you a lot more width to play with to land your stays on.
I've noticed the bend in the C-tube. Is it fairly short in the rear? Or?
It's 420, so not crazy short, but just a bit more mud clearance as well.
And the X-frame was a frame that Raleigh, I don't know if they invented it, but they first showed one in their lineup in 1896, and they made them up through 1936. And he says, I've always wanted one, but he says, I can't ever lay my hands on an original. He said, so I thought the next best thing would be a really nice one with fancy lugs and Reynolds tubing. He says, can you build it? And I said, well, yeah, I could, but you understand that there's not a stock lug in that. And so all those lugs are going to have to be fabricated. And he says, yeah, I get that, but can you do it? And I said, yeah. He says, okay, great, let's do it. And so I built it. And then, he said, oh, by the way, I need, one of these inverted 7-seat posts because that's what they used back then. But the thing is, they didn't make them in 27.2. That had to be fabricated. Wow. And then he also decided, he had to have a vintage-looking rack. So we built the rack. When I called Andy Newlands, my Reynolds tubing supplier, and I kind of described it, telling him what tubes I needed. He says, Jeff, what are you building? So I sent him a photo of the vintage one. And he says, okay, Jeff. He says, you got to bring that to Made.
So what kind of oddly spec tubing did you have to get for this build?
Well, these two tubes either needed to be straight gauge or the butts in them needed to be long enough. I mean, normally, you don't get a butt long enough to make that thing. So I needed tubes that were, okay, first of all, this is a really long frame.
Yeah.
And so, these needed to be 1-inch diameter tubes with a long enough butt section that I could do that cross right here. It has a 19.5-inch chainstay length.
Wow.
a little beyond normal, even for like a touring bike.
Right.
And so those are not 531; those are 853.
Okay.
Which, I mean, why they had a 853 chainstay length that long, I don't know. But they did, and it's like, okay, I'm glad.
Tell me about the lugs. How many lugs are there, and what was the process?
Okay, these two are head tube lugs, and the head tube sleeve portion of the lug is from a vintage Nervex set. You know, the sockets on those, you know, like on the head tube one, it was designed for a horizontal top tube. So that socket had to be totally removed. This one, you know, the down tube socket was too short and at the wrong angle, so that had to be cut off. And then these two pieces and this piece, you know, had to be, well, I had to get tubing that had to be bored to the correct internal diameter, thinned some, and then mitered, and then cut to shape, and then fillet brazed to this piece, and then while the rest of that, you know, when the lug was basically complete, you know, it could be brazed into the frame.
Right. So you had to really do some work on like some blanks.
This frame probably took at least twice as long as one of my normal frames.
Right.
At least.
Tell me about some of the components. Where'd the cranks come from?
Well, the guy I built it for sourced most of the parts.
Okay.
The crank, you might notice, is a cothered crank, but you also notice it's aluminum alloy. So this is like only the second one of these I've ever seen. The first one I saw was like about a month before he sent me this one. You know, I saw it at a vintage bike show, and it was made in England, and I don't know if it was actually made by a company called Holdsworth, but it was marketed by Holdsworth, and I don't know where he sourced it. The rear hub is a vintage Sturmey Archer hub with an internal drum brake. The front is a new Sturmey Archer drum brake. He found a vintage one, but not soon enough for us to get a wheel build up, and plus it did not have these cutouts here, which I already had highlighted. And you know, it's like,
how about the saddle?
The saddle he also sourced. My understanding is it is a more or less new old stock. I don't exactly know how old it is, but I do notice like these bag loops right here.
Yeah.
You know, that is nickel plate. So that tells me this was probably built pre-World War II.
Oh, wow.
Because usually after World War II, you know, nickel was, you know, copper, then nickel, and then chrome. Then they would chrome on top, but they didn't leave it nickel. I mean, so, but pre-World War II, most plating was nickel. The folks from the Brooks booth were over yesterday looking at it, taking pictures. You know, I mean, they were curious about it. So.
And you had to fabricate the seat post?
I had to fabricate the seat post. The actual seat post started out as an 1.1 piece of chrome moly with a pretty thick wall thickness that I then, on the lathe, turned down to 27.2.
Right.
And then, of course, I had to mill that out and slip that inside so that I had a lot of surface area to braze that. And then, of course, I made domed end caps for it. So, you know, the stem doesn't look like much.
Yeah.
But the stem was also made by Reynolds. The same company made the tubing back. Once again, I'm almost certain it's pre-war.
This one's for my wife. These are the first 3 out the shop door for me. I've been doing it as a hobby for a while, but kind of introducing myself at this show. Round town bikes made for carrying a front load with lights and fenders. So the lights are on a front dynamo, rear light on the seat. But I make the frame, fork, stem, rack, handlebars. Just try to make really simple, sleek Philip raised steel bikes.
Since you do the complete package, which is more complicated to do, the racks or the frame?
The racks. Just because you're kind of making stuff up on the fly and holding stuff with magnets and gum or whatever. But it's funny, I built up a gravel bike for the show and it took like 3 hours.
Yeah.
And these take like 3 days to assemble, you know. I get pretty into the weeds on all the little details, but a lot of the stuff I do is just super labor intensive. So it's all Philip raised. The rack's stainless, so I have to go in and polish all the little fillets on the rack. I do all custom brake mounts. I try and machine as much stuff as possible. Yeah. And then I do some thoughtful things like most fenders mount with a screw that goes up into the brake bridge, right?
Right.
But I've never liked it because you pinch down on the leather washer so tight to get it snug. So one of the little things I do is I run the screw the other way and countersink it into the bridge. Okay. So then you can put a lock washer on the underside of the fender. You make 1,000 of those decisions on a bike, and hopefully it turns out kind of cool. Stems, Philip raised steel, Bars are titanium that I bend myself. I weigh like 170 pounds and it takes all of it to bend the bars. Yeah, so I made the stem to fit 25/4 bars, but the tie are 7/8 bars. So I made the custom shims on the lathe.
Okay.
So essentially you just have a shim, but it also, the aluminum grips down on the tie a little nicer than steel does.
Yeah.
Because these bars in this type of stem with a single bolt tend to slip a little bit.
Looks super clean.
Yeah, that's the idea. I like doing a lot of stuff myself, and I don't like adapters and shims and things, so I try to make all that stuff myself.
So we're here with Ashley from Significant Other Bikes. It's been a whole year. Not a fixed gear. What do you have this year?
Yeah, no fixed gears this year. I did bring a few different drivetrains. We have a Pinion bike here for a client. Started working on this back in June. We went with the Geoshift Pinion setup here for her. I wanted to keep everything looking as clean as I could, which is difficult when you've got a battery and a bunch of cables and a brake line. We kind of just sat down, thought it through, was a little bit creative with things, routed my brake line through the top tube C-stay here.
Okay.
Got the battery inside the down tube, and I'm actually running the charge cable through the handlebar here and drilled out the end cap so you can just fit the head through here.
Okay.
Charge it out of sight. Didn't want anything kind of like dangling out of the down tube, anything like that. So just try to keep everything clean.
Yeah. So why go with the split top tube on this bike?
So it's actually something I always wanted to try.
Yeah.
And I asked the rider if they'd be interested in that kind of design, and I catted it first so she could see it in like 3D.
Yeah.
And she was on board. She was like, "That's super cool. Like, let's go for it." It took me a little bit of time to figure out how to like actually do it with my hands. But yeah, eventually got it right, and I think it came out super cool. Yeah, I guess I have a little cat detail on top here. That was a special little thing for the rider. I was discussing this with their partner. I wanted to add like something special for her. Found out she liked cats, so got this little guy laser cut by Suncut Sun and put that there just for her.
So this is the Sugarfoot. This is the first 1-inch threaded bike that we've built in our workshop. Although the reason we're doing this is our frame builder Brad, like if left to his own devices, this is what he likes to build. Very into classic rando bikes. Well, I love vintage bikes, and I've been getting more into like the Rivendell thing, but I'm very particular about my geometries. And so it's like, hey, why don't we kind of build our own? So while this is very traditionally styled, the geometry is modern, like aggressive gravel geo. Although the trail number is a little bit lower, it's in the high 50s. It's like a 58 trail.
Yeah.
But the rear end is relatively short. The bottom bracket is a little tall because I'm going to ride this thing on and off road. It fits a 2.2 by 650B tire. Construction, it's a Richard Sachs lug set that Brad has carved pretty heavily. Pacenti fork crown. Those are the Rando Kasai fork blades.
Oh, nice.
We use the end of the blade where they are the most thin, so I should get a lot of very nice movement and suppleness out of that bad boy. I'm really excited about the paint job. Imron paint was used heavily in the 80s. It's a very industrial paint, super durable, and there's a certain just quality to Imron. That's what this is painted with. We just had a daughter, her name's Olive, so this is golden olive metallic, connectorless dynamo routing. We made the stem in our workshop.
So why would someone in 2024 still entertain a quill stem?
Now, this is a very privileged statement, and I have a lot of bikes because I work in the bike industry. If I was if I was a carpenter, I'd have a lot of woodworking tools. Same thing, but this is different than all my other bikes. Like I have a titanium gravel race bike, which I also adore. There's something that just speaks, that stirs, it stirs in me for seeing this. We're doing this, and there's no performance compromise. This is a very lightweight frame set. Yeah, it has a 1-inch, a quill stem, but the bars are exactly where I want them to be, so it's not like there's really a compromise.
Right. How short is the rear? It looks kind of tucked. Is it like in the 420s or so? Or
no, it's a 430. Okay. I like to have a little bit longer stay, not too long.
Right.
Like our 700C bikes do a 440, which is where you really need to be to fit a 50C tire.
Yeah.
This is 430, which I think is a really good match for the 27.5 by 2.2.
Yeah.
But I want that stability while descending, especially since my bottom bracket isn't particularly low for a gravel bike.
Right.
So I want to have a little bit longer wheelbase, and I want to get some compliance out of the rear end as well. We actually have a fillet brazed bottom bracket shell, not lugged, because the lugs were constraining us in terms of the tire size and some of the angles that we wanted. So we just got rid of that constraint, fillet brazed it. I love a fillet brazed bike.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of a neat touch that we did a hybrid frame joinery.
I've noticed for your drivetrain, you've got this newfangled 3 1-bys at the same time. Tell me about that.
So I'm a vintage mountain bike buff, and so I have all this vintage mountain bike stuff laying around.
Yeah.
And I've really gotten back into it. Like, for a while, I was putting a 1 chainring on all of my old triples, and I was really thinking that was really cool. But it's not cool when you have to climb or descend and you run out of gear.
Right.
And so now I'm back to I'm back to triples. You know, Sun-Tour Barcons have been working great since 1973 or whenever they introduced this part.
Right.
They'll work great every day. There's no adjustment. And it's a M900 Shimano XTR drivetrain. I happened to find some new old stock cranks, so I basically built a whole bike around that crank.
Yeah.
11 by 28 on the rear end, which is fine for me. And, you know, the stuff that I ride, and I think it's got a 46 up front, and it works great. I can ride anything.
Yeah, so this is our new Monster Grav, aluminum alloy frame, steel fork, and it's called the Chessie, which is the monster that lives in the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. So it clears 700 by 50s, and then the smaller sizes get 650B or 26-inch wheels, because there's no way you can fit that big of a tire in a small size frame.
Right.
So we really wanted to make sure that the fit and geometry and handling worked really well for the larger size frames as well as the small size frames, because small size frames often don't get a lot of love in the industry. So we wanted to make sure that it was good for everyone.
So tell me about the dropout. Are those sliding dropouts or are they just modular?
These are sliding dropouts that we designed. We were not happy with the sliding dropouts that were on the market.
Yeah.
So this is a sliding dropout that has a flat mount on the other side, because I've seen a lot of other flat mounts that have sliders. It's always like it doesn't quite work, or is like really weird hardware or weird clearances.
Yeah.
This one will work for both mechanical and hydro brakes, and works really nicely. I'm very happy with them, and we'll probably introduce some sort of iteration of this in other future models. But the nice thing with the sliders is that if you do want a snappier rear end, just shove them forward.
So interesting choice to go with aluminum. What are the benefits, or why do you go with an aluminum frame?
So with aluminum, you can get a lighter frame. If we wanted to make this in steel, it would have to be thicker tubes, it would be heavier, it would be more expensive. And with the aluminum, you still have a really, really nice ride quality, and it's a pound lighter than a comparable steel frame.
Okay.
So it's just a really good medium for, I think, this type of bike. And with the steel fork that it's going to come with, it still has a really nice ride quality, and you get the capacity of having cargo cages, you can mount fenders and racks to it.
Right.
And with the tapered head tube, you can still run a carbon fork if you want to.
So let's talk about the logo. Something looks different here.
Yes. So this is our new Velo Orange logo, as you can see.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, it's more fresh, modern, but it still harkens to, you know, our roots and offering timeless designs. And
this is the Roland Special. It's kind of the first official model that I'm be releasing soon. And this is what I'm calling Heat-ano. So I basically just lightly hit it with the torch to express those colors. Got to be kind of careful because it's very easy to do it wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, so did the frame, matching stem and rack. And yeah, this is essentially inspired by like cruisers and 90s mountain bikes. I wanted it to be equally fun and practical. My buddy Roland is retiring. He used to have a cruiser company. So I designed the bike around this fork that he had a few of.
What's the wheel and tire size?
So this is a 26-inch by 2.3. The bike frame and fork can fit up to a 2.4.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. It's rim brake, 71 degree head tube.
Yeah.
So very, very comfy ride.
Yeah. I know someone's going to ask, like, you know, how is this different from a 90s mountain bike? Like, how is it geometrically different?
It's extremely similar to the 90s. I took inspiration from that Geo because it's really like a tried and true geometry, you know? It's comfortable on the road, it's comfortable off-road. You can load up the front a little bit. This fork has a 45 millimeter rake. So 71 degrees was kind of the right spot for good trail. But there's a reason that, you know, 90s mountain bikes have kind of made a resurgence because they're utilitarian, they're reliable. And so, I mean, I had one that I was using to commute, and that's what I wanted to do with this.
Russell, this is Santiago from Scarab. Basically, this is our new model, the Andes. It is a brevet bike, basically long distance riding. We had three things in mind when designing it from a, let's call it, structural and functional point of view. We had durability, maximum comfort, and maximum functionality. So we usually build every single bike with a Columbus Spirit or something pretty close to that. On this one, we used a Spirit tube that's slightly smaller diameter, bigger wall thickness, and that basically provides a very durable bike, but at the same time flexes a bit more. So we wanted something that is not going to punish the rider on super long distance and long hours on the bike. We also added dynamo routing, T47 bottom bracket to be able to run it easily, fender mounts, rack mounts, a steel fork, basically everything you can dream about on long distance and long journeys. So the paint is actually a new launch as well. And it's first time we actually use watercolor on the actual paint job. So it's called the Condor. Condor is basically Colombia's national bird, and it's a mighty bird along the Andes. And it's a watercolor collaboration with a local artist. It has a bit of an indigenous pattern all over the bike. Has all of the highest peaks in the Andes, along from north to south. Has a lot of basically deep and rich cultural factors into it. So it's all a huge layer of different techniques that have been mixed here in terms of stencil, watercolor, transfer, and just regular airspray.
Cool. Tell me a little bit about the geometry. Is it short in the rear or a little bit more relaxed?
So definitely it's a more relaxed geometry. Again, this is a bike to be riding for a long time, for a low trail bike with long rear end. We wanted something that absorbed it a bit more. Actually, the bike, we wanted it longer because it fits 42 700 by 42s. Right now it has 36 width fenders. You can fit 650Bs by 48. So the range of tires that you can actually accommodate is huge. And again, we wanted something very subtle, something that along the way would flex a bit and absorb that punishment from the road. These are all made in El Retiro in Colombia. El Retiro is a little town outside the city of Medellin. We're 35 minutes away up in the mountains, and everything is made in our shop, from basically cutting, welding, painting, all is made in-house.
Cool. Well, it's beautiful.
Yeah, so off-road drop bar mountain bike, I would say, rather than gravel bike. But yeah, so it's a 29 plus compatible. We'll take a full 3-inch wide tire, set up for a nice high front end, relatively high bar position, slacker angles than a typical gravel bike, and a little lower bottom bracket. So nice and stable, but lovely titanium zing to it, and rides beautifully. This is a custom one. We're doing a small batch, production batch of them, the first pre-production one of which is at the back there. But a few little changes from this, but basically the same. Should have them hopefully before the end of the year. We also do a steel version of the same frame set, the Griffin. Which is same geometry and everything, a few little differences. That one has an EBB as well.
What are the head tube angles?
This is 70, with a 55 mil fork offset, so it's quite sharp handling at the front as well. So, particularly with the bigger wheel, it works really well. And even more so if you've got a load on the front. So,
It looks like it's running a relatively short stem. Is it designed for that with like a longer top tube?
Wide bar, short stem, they ride really nicely. So the shorter stem with the sort of faster handling as well helps you keep things under control. And again, with the wider bar, these are pretty massive. The literal showstopper.
Yeah.
But I prefer a slightly narrower bar, but still, a wide gravel bar is the go-to, which fortunately we've got a big selection of these days. Yeah.
Okay.
Fully external cable routing, so something you don't see so much of, but I like to keep it really practical, user serviceable, home mechanic friendly design, so no weird standards, external cables, so everything sort of comes on and off.
It looks like the fork is Thai also, and it's got 3-pack mounts as well as like eyelets for a low rider or something.
Yeah, this is kind of the whole kitchen sink fork. Probably we won't have the fourth mount, as it were, but the 3-pack mounts will be at 90 degrees, so they can double up as a rack mount, and also put another rack on the inside for a Tubus Duo low rider rack, which attaches both sides of the fork blade, so you don't need the big loop for low rider mounts as well. So yeah, sort of going to that general setup pretty much on all the frames as we evolve into next generations. When we've done that setup on a few custom forks for people, and it works really nicely.